All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. We are privileged to have author Greg Ellis on with us today. He is the author of this book, Captain Moroni, His Early Years. Now, this book is very, very interesting. I was reading the back, and I just have to ask you, Greg, really quick.
Sure.
Um, you give some characters in the Book of Mormon, like Alma the Elder, Lehi. There's Moroni, there's Teancum, there's Nehor, Gideon, Amalickiah, lots of characters that we know in the Book of Mormon. But one
Okay.
character that you made up in the Book of Mormon, and I noticed the name, Lehi's sister, you gave her the name of Tirzah. Now
Correct.
I just have to ask, where did you get that name from? Because I have a very famous movie in mind where there's a sister named Tirzah and she's Jewish. So
And her brother is Judah Ben Hur.
yes, okay. That's it. Okay, I was right.
Yep. I when I saw that as a kid, for some reason I just fell in love with that name. And so when I started writing it, I was thinking, okay, what do I call her? I'm like, Tears.
I mean, it's a great name. So,
Yeah, and it's well used and stuff. But when what's his name narrated it, or the he said Terza. And it was too late. It was already recorded, and I'm like, no, it's Tears.
oh man. Wait, you have an audiobook version of this?
It's an
Oh,
Audible.
Audible. Okay, well that's good to know.
Yeah,
Oh,
If
that's so good
anyone
to know because
by Kirby
I
Hayborn.
was I was worried that I wouldn't be able to contribute anything to this because I haven't read it because I only learned about it recently and I wasn't able to get my hands on it. But now that I know that it's on Audible, that's very good to know.
Well, when we were on a mission to the Barbados Bridgetown mission, I got contact with my friend Merrill Osman, and he, through a couple of people, put me in contact with Kirby Hayborn's manager, and I was able to get that completed while we were still on our mission there. So we were happy to do that, and we haven't really done a whole lot of marketing. That's obviously why we're here, and to talk about it as to figure out why did I do it, how did I do it, and go down that road.
okay. Fantastic. Well, let's kick into the next gear then. So, Greg,
Yeah.
um, in your own words, I mean, there's a summary on the back of this book, but because you're the author, in your own words, for someone who has never heard of this book before, what would be the summary of this book?
The summary would be assuming that they have an LDS background, because if you don't, it really makes no sense, obviously. Um, it would be about a coming of age of a boy. I started out as he's 9 years old, and I wanted to give him a little bit different slant on what he looked like. So I made him a very awkward, overweight 9-year-old boy. But I also put him in with a well-known family. And actually, what started me out in is many times I've read the Book of Mormon, but when I read where Alma says in Mosiah that one of his sons be named Alma after his father. And so that phrase, one of his sons, and I'm like, whoa, he had more than one son. And sometimes we have to read between the lines. Actually, we read it, but it doesn't register. So one of his sons. So I decided to make Moroni the son of the eldest son of Alma the older. Does that make sense? So you have Alma the older, and he had three sons. His oldest one was Neam, his second was Zoram, and the third was Alma, who we call Alma the younger.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to make Moroni like I said, a 9-year-old, overweight, awkward, but highly intelligent. But he was be made fun of by his peers. And Lehi, and we find this out when it talks about in Alma 16 with the invasion that Zoram, the chief captain, and his two sons, Lehi and Aha, I guess Aha, went to Alma the prophet, meaning Alma the younger. And so I'm like, okay, so Alma, second son, Zoram, would tie in with Aha and Lehi. And so that would make them Moroni's cousins. Does that make well, it's
Interesting.
written down. So you have Alma the older. His oldest son is Neam. His next son is Zoram, and his third son is Alma the younger. So Zoram becomes um, the chief captain, and he runs the army for we don't know for how long or when he was made chief captain. But his two sons we know were Aha and what did I say?
Lehi.
Lehi, yeah.
Yep.
And all
That's the
these
first
things
time we
wrote.
hear about Lehi.
Yeah. And so if you look in
Well,
the back of the book and it'll give you the description like three or four different types of Lehis. And one of them says he could be the Lehi that was with Moroni during the battles.
that would make sense. Yeah.
So I put that together. And when I began, my wife kind of said, well, is this going to be a war book? And I went, yes and no. We have to work up to who Moroni is. And she came up with a phrase. She goes, before the warrior was the boy of faith. And I like that. So I took him at starting at 9 up through the time he's 16. So in the book, he's we finish when he's 16 years old. And
I find this very interesting as you're talking about, like, it's Captain Moroni, his early years, right? Um,
we think about his early years. We
and
we don't.
well, I think this book is very timely right now, not because there's like a Captain Moroni movie out right now, but because this year, like literally within the last like month, like this month in the month, well, sorry, it's now August 1st.
August,
Last
yeah.
month in July, you had a very interesting movie, a historical film come out about a young Washington.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was basically his early years
That's
that
right.
most people don't know about. Granted, this is mostly based on like it's very much historical fiction. We
Yeah,
don't have too much about Moroni's actual early years, which is why I think it's very interesting that you decided to jump into what his early years could have looked like and give like a narrative. And I think that was very interesting. And you threw that into the course of actual Book of Mormon events.
exactly. So
So that was great.
when you do a historical fiction, of course, you got to remain true to the history that we have.
Which
And
leads me
so,
to my next question is what did your research look like for this book?
well, it took me 5 years of research,
Oh, wow.
basically. And because we know when we read the Book of Mormon, we know all the things that it says. But on the plates that Joseph Smith was able to translate, we don't have much of the history, the culture, the background of the people. So I had to go to Hugh Nibley, and he and he of course wrote what I think he had three classes for honor student in which he talks about, and I read all three of them, and so uh, it provided me with the cultural background um, as to what life may have been. And there's so many things in the Book of Mormon that we don't really, it doesn't register with us. One example is many times the prophets would be teaching people, and he said, have you not read the scriptures? And then he goes on. And if you would read the scriptures, if you have read them, you do not understand them, this type of thing. And so you have to ask yourself, where did they get the scriptures? Well, we know of only one record that they brought from Jerusalem as the brass plates. So I would assume that when Nephi and then finally separated from his brothers, that they went to what is recorded as the land of Nephi, that he set to work employing several scribes to copy the breastplates. Otherwise, how would they have the scriptures? And so every time that one of the prophets says, "Have you not read the scriptures?" or "Have you not read Isaiah?" and all this stuff, it's like they had access to it.
And
So
it would,
how did
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just thinking about that, I'm like, you know what? That does make sense. I mean, the the only two record keepers that we're aware of in at the beginning of the Book of Mormon in Lehi's family would be Lehi, because there was the Book of Lehi, and
right,
then there's Nephi because we have the Book of Nephi.
right,
And if Nephi was, he was a record keeper. Well,
right,
I would imagine it would make sense for his posterity to continue that practice of
right,
record keeping. And you actually see that with Jacob, with Enos, with Jerem and Omni, and you see the people in those books
right,
keeping a record, like all the way
right.
through the Book of Mormon. Like it's a family habit, if
Yeah,
that's a good term for it. So
yeah.
that's very interesting that you talk about, they had the brass plates and they could have like made like several, transcriptions
I would think thousands of as it went. So
in the
yeah,
beginning, in the beginning,
yeah,
right?
and then three guys got it and they copied it and so forth and so on. So by the time that they go from the land of Nephi to Zarahemla, they're probably carrying with them many copies of it. And I would suggest perhaps that they did not write these copies on metal plates. They wrote it on parchment.
That would make sense. Out of curiosity, what do you think, because they went through painstaking efforts to, in many cases, to transcribe, they had to write down every single copy. Like they
Right.
didn't have a printing press back then. They had to write by hand everything. And that's just on like the paper or parchment of the time. Imagine the brass plates and the gold plates and
Yeah.
all of the other plates that people had worked on throughout the years.
Yeah.
Like that, it sounds like, I've never done that myself, but that sounds like a lot of work if you're writing on metal. I'm
Right.
just curious
As
with
someone
how
who
hard it
has
was for them to do and like lug that stuff around. What do you
I
think
know.
their thoughts would be about these?
They would say, "Oh man, back in my day, we didn't have." It's like my parents would say, "We had to walk 5 miles to school uphill, forwards and backwards." Like, okay,
Yeah. But these are the sort of questions that, for me anyway, I appreciate because it really makes me think like, what did these people, because they were people, what did they have to go through and how did they view what they had
yeah,
in light of how we view what we have today,
right.
you know?
So getting back to Hugh Nibley, he goes in quite detail, and he asserts that the Egyptians had a tremendous impact on Nephite culture, or as in Jewish culture. Because we learned that they were actually writing in Reformed Egyptian or Reformed Hebrew, a combination. And he talks about things like the Dead Sea Scrolls that were discovered. And he's read most of the stuff that was available before he passed away. And for example, he states in there that they have a scroll that they call, or he calls the battle scroll. And in this battle scroll, it described how the Egyptian army went to war. First of all, they had to write down the reasons they were going to war. And then they would put it on a banner or a flag or a title of liberty. And they would go out, the priest would go out, they would raise the title of liberty, and they would bless their army and curse their enemies.
Of course.
So Hugh Nibley says that perhaps Captain Moroni um, had read that part about going to war and the things that were happening in his time with the kingmen. that's why he put it on his coat and raised the banner and so forth and became the title of liberty.
That was their
And
mission statement. Yeah.
yeah, so Hugh Nibley says it wasn't that he just boing, it was that he had read it and he knew that that was a viable way to go to war. Any of the other wars that they had or battles, we really don't have that much description of uh, the preparations they made. They just went to war. And so it was, so all of these things that I read were congealing up here in this bald head, trying to figure out how to put it together. And when I said, my wife asked me if it was going to be a book on war, it's like, no, because we know Moroni had at least one son, you know, and the daughters get left out. There's only a few women mentioned other than Lehi's wife and so forth. We don't know Nephi's wife. We don't know Moroni's wife's name. We don't know anything about them. They left them
Yep.
out. Probably not because that they didn't want to mention. They probably did want to mention them, but with the difficulty of writing on metal plates and scribing on there, they just didn't have room or the strength. So I had to invent all of that stuff. So I had to create families. I had to create businesses, businesses just like in any other culture. You know, you had people that sold things, people that built things, people that imported things, and we know there was a lot of commercialism going on. We know that when the people went to different lands, there was no timber, so they said they took it by way of shipping.
Yep, they had shipping.
Yeah, they did a lot of things, and even mentions that they created machines. And I'm like, in our mind, when we say machines, it's something either electrical, solar, gas, something.
Industrial manufacturing, robots, stuff like that.
Their machines were made out of stone or wood that they used. And so one interesting thing is I mentioned Hagoth towards the end of my story. And I put Hagoth being a curious person that he created a water wheel by the riverside and that pumped water into the city so they didn't have to walk down and get their water.
That guy must have had ADHD. I'm telling
I agree. So anyway, just little things like that took me, like I said, about 5 years to put together. So
What was the most fascinating thing that you personally learned on this journey? Because that's what it is. Like research is a massive journey. What was the number one thing you took away that excited you the most? That you were like, "What? I had no idea about." Boom.
I had many of those aha moments when writing it. Um, my wife would often say, maybe the book was only meant for you. And I'm like, I I agree with that. It was meant for me, but I'd like to share it. You know,
Yeah.
I I think I guess with Hugh Nibley and others that we may be familiar with, Rod Meldrum, um, what's his name that did Jonathan Neville, who
Jonathan
did
Neville, Wayne
Colonize
Manning.
America, um, because growing up, I kind of wondered where the Book of Mormon took place. And this isn't to say that in North America is where it took place. As I mentioned in my book in the beginning of it, I had to pick a place. So the two camps in the church right now is Mesoamerica or Heartland. And I've never been to Mesoamerica. I've never gone down there or anything like that. So I chose what I know. And so I chose North America or the Heartland. And that's not to disparage anybody that doesn't believe that. As the brethren have said, it's not a study in geology. And so it's to become disciples of Christ. And I guess the number one thing I got out of this was that these are people. They had wives, they had children, they had tough times, they had joy, they had sorrow, and all of these things, and tried to bring that out. for me was a daunting task, um, but I wanted to make them living figures.
Hmm.
And so I, I hope I've done that.
Well, if anyone wants to put that to the test, just remember you can order this book online or listen to it through Audible.
Amazon books, yeah, or Audible,
I've listened to many books via audio over the years. The older I
yeah.
get, the harder it is for me to actually read. So
I know you got to sit down and actually turn pages and stuff. And I'm not used to the Audible
it's
as
exhausting.
yeah, but we Kirby really did a wonderful job. I would sit there and I would listen to a chapter and I turn them over. I go, did I write that? And she goes, I have. And I'm like, you know, a couple of things I'll share is when I'm writing, I'll come up and I'll say, I need word, and a word would come into my mind, and I'm not joking. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And I would look it up and I go, that's exactly the word I need, but I'd never used that before in my life.
Wow. So you got some
Yeah.
inspiration on this journey. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
inspired.
Well, so it sounds like it was definitely a very rewarding experience for you just getting to write this book alone, you know.
Right.
And now you get to share it with others and, you know, hopefully other people get to receive many of the rewards that you uncovered for yourself as you were writing this book. Um
Depending on how this first book is accepted, I will continue to write through the end of his life because we know that he dies.
okay.
But we
So,
have all that stuff. So
yeah.
this book takes in roughly from Mosiah 28 to Alma 2. I mean, there's not a whole lot of chapters in the years that I put in there.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
that's definitely before like the war chapters, which are like
right,
what, Alma 45,
that
Alma
starts at
44 maybe.
43. Yeah, 43.
43, 43.
Yeah,
Okay, I was one off. So,
that's all right. But I just learned a lot when you're reading the scriptures. There's a lot in there than just the words that you're reading. For example, in Alma 43, it mentioned this is the first time they mentions Moroni. He was chief captain of the armies, and he was made chief captain, the word when he was 25. Now, most people, including myself, would say, oh, in chapter 43, Moroni is 25 years old. But it says when he was made chief captain. And we have no idea when he was made chief captain. We assume, because we're reading in Alma 43, that that's when he was named. But because of the way he had changed. So when the enemy came to battle, they found the Nephites, Moroni had completely changed the way of going to battle. And they had given them armor. And he had done things that is not clear to us what he had done. And so I took that going, well, see, the last named chief captain was Zoram, Lehi's father. So I put in there 2 to 3 years after Zoram that Moroni was made the next chief captain. And during those 2 to 3 or more years after he was made chief captain, then he introduced the armor, the helmets, the shields, the arm plates and breastplates and so forth and so on, because that took time. And so I gave him 2 or 3 years, I think, so that when Zarahemna came upon them, I was like, whoa, this is a different army than we've ever faced before.
and
And
come if I'm not mistaken, if you look at the point, because Zarahemna was a Zoramite,
mhm,
and the Zoramites had only recently seceded from the Nephites.
right,
So you're right. It would have been like a very, very brief space of time, like not many years
right,
between, hey, we just seceded from the Nephites, Lamanites. You want to go to war with them? All right, we know all of their modern, up-to-date battle techniques, their defenses, their,
right,
everything.
right.
So yeah, that's a very good point. That's interesting. Anyway, continue.
What I'm saying is there's little tidbits in there if you are looking for them, that when we read it and we're thinking along those lines, you're like, aha, aha moments when we learn things about them. So I think another point was, I hate to spill the beans, but Moroni's father dies in a tragic way due to a what did they call them? But not a tornado, a
Nat
twister,
Natural disaster,
whirlwind.
whirlwind.
And
Okay.
yeah, so his father, Neum, is they have the family has several businesses, and what I did was I made the family a large conglomerate of businesses for the main point of supporting themselves and also to support Alma the Younger in his government and priestly duties.
Hmm.
Okay, so that whole family supported Alma and his family because we know he had at least three boys. And we always have to assume that they have three boys, they probably had at least a couple of sisters in there, you know. And so I have Neum owning a logging company to the north. And while they're up there, a tornado strikes and a tree falls on his father and he dies. And Moroni is just grief stricken. And by this time, he's around 15 years old, and he has slimmed down, very muscular now. He's been felling trees all summer long. He's been in a school of Gideon, and training to be a warrior. And so he's a tough dude at this point. But after his father dies, Tiancum is with. Oh, I can tell you that story too. Remind me after I finish this
We
story.
might not have too much time left.
Oh, okay.
So, but before our time runs out, I wanna pass the mic over to Sam because Sam,
Yeah,
like me, is a fellow Book of Mormon fan and enthusiast. We
yeah.
want to see Book of Mormon movies made. We want to see more books written, lots more content done. So,
And I saw where you were talking about Tiancum the other day, that you wanted to see a movie on Tiancum.
yes,
Oh yeah, I think a lot of people do.
Yeah,
I think
he's
that's one of the
a,
most. I'm
continue.
sorry.
I saw he's a tough guy.
Oh
I mean,
yeah, and you don't get to that level by just being somebody in the same way that you would say about Moroni.
Right.
Um, I know that there have been a couple of books written about even just Tiancum exclusively. Um,
Ten
but
Issues
yeah,
Among the
no, it's something.
Nephites, the first book, that has to do with Tiancum, and that's what got me into Ten Issues Among the Nephites when I was a teenager.
Right. Right.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That was just a fun point. Continue.
No, it's okay. No, I confess I haven't read those, and I probably really should. um, but what I appreciate about what you were talking about, Greg, is for a lot of this you looked into and researched and just imagined up things that would make sense. The things that I love to think about are like, what's an ordinary job or day? Like, I love thinking about the ordinary lives of Nephites. So I would actually love to see stories written about just like you're talking about, like a logger in the city of Gideon or something like that. So I'm happy that I'm not only am I not the only one who thinks that way, but I'm happy to know that there's content out there, and so I'm excited to get my hands on your book to look into this world that you have expanded on from what we've already been given. I think it's excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll just jump into that. But Moroni had a very spiritual experience when he walked down into the forest after his father died and just fell on his face in the mud and clenched his, like this, and then he heard a voice. And if you think it's intimidating, try to write for the Lord, words that he would use. I mean, I struggled with that for weeks and weeks. What do I say? How do I do it? And so forth. But I'll let you read it. Tiancum, I painted Tiancum as an orphan who came way up north and walked after his father died in a mining accident up in Minnesota, what we would call Minnesota. I have my map in front of me. Yeah. So
Is it a
he,
Heartland map?
yeah, it's this huge map like this, and I've got all sorts of marks and drawn on it, and I've got cities where they are and the distances between the cities and so forth.
Oh man,
So
that's
Can you
awesome.
send us a photo of that?
I wish I could turn my camera around, you could see it.
If you take
Uh,
a picture and send it to us, we will put it up on the Facebook page.
okay, I'm not sure how it'll turn out, but we can give it a shot.
Yeah,
But
actually,
anyway,
Greg, if you don't mind me interrupting
sure,
one more time. Um,
it's your
in our
show.
we have like 6 minutes left, but
Oh, okay.
um, one thing I like asking artists and creatives, whether they're making a movie or a book, I want to ask you because you did a lot of research and you did a lot of research in the Book of Mormon and the works of other scholars like Hugh Nibley and through history when putting this stuff together in Jewish culture. That's all awesome. But I want to know, was there any part of the book that you drew on your own experience? Like, have you had an experience that was profound in a way that you were like, you know what? I've been through this. This character's going through this. I know exactly how I'm going to write this. Was there a point in the book where that happened?
Yes,
And
yes, very much so.
and in like the next like 2 minutes, would you be able to share with us what that
Yeah.
experience was that you were like, I'm going to put this in the book?
So the character Gideon, who was murdered by Nehor,
Hmm.
he created a school that took boys starting at age 12, and they, after the harvest in October, they went all the way through the next year. They stayed at this school down in the city of Gideon, and it is there that Moroni, Lehi, um, and Tiancum. Of course, Tiancum shows up there. But what I had, because I'm a veteran, okay, I went to Officer Basic at Fort Knox, Kentucky in June and July. Ugh, really hot and humid. And we had to stay in these old World War II barracks that are just double cots, bunks rather, all the way, this whole room, there's 50 of them, and so hot, so miserable. But yet, during that time, you drew very close to your bunkmate and others in your squad and so forth. And we had these at night, people would be talking, like, for example, I used in my book, hey, Steve, do that trick where you open your mouth and your whole face disappears, you know? And so I put that in there, that people are lonely at night. There's just you and your thoughts. And so Moroni, the first night he's there, he had to fight back tears because he missed his family. And I know some of the cadets that were there missed their family. I didn't hear anybody crying, but I just put Moroni in that thing that I had experienced.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that helps.
So, did you write down any parts in the book where you're talking about like how miserable like military training would have been for them? They're like, it's so hot and muggy, like
Yeah,
this sucks. Like
yeah.
in
In
basic
Fort
training and
Knox,
boot camp, they often talk about embracing the suck.
yeah.
That's a military culture thing.
Welcome to the suck. Yep,
So you brought that into
I did.
this.
Because
That is fantastic.
in marching, we had to go down a hill and up. So we called this agony and this was misery. Agony, misery, hill. And so sometimes if you messed up, they'd turn you around and you have to go back up. And so with Moroni, his older brother had gone to the school, and he says to him, now, there's going to be a time when you wish you were not even born. He says, but you have to look at something way ahead, like a tree, a rock, something, a mountain, and say, I'm going to make it that far. And then when you get there, pick another point, say, I'm going to make it that far. And so that was reality to me because it wasn't easy.
Man, this book just became like
Gosh,
10
I need to
times
get this book.
richer.
It sounds awesome.
Sounds like you agree, Sam. I think like this book is
I,
definitely something that young men in particular need to be reading today. Young women too, but as a young man and I know what I experienced growing up, this is the sort of thing I
Yeah.
would have loved to have my hands on when I was 13, 15, even like 17 years old, okay?
A little bit inspiration there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anyway, So I just want to thank you, Greg, for coming on today. This has been so much fun. Um,
Yeah.
Sam, do you want to give one of the final words?
Yeah, just what Jacob said. Thank you for sharing all this with us. I'd love to have you on again. I say let's make this a
Yeah.
regular thing.
I'd,
But
I'd be
no,
happy
I
to.
no, I appreciate how much effort you put into your book. Again, I can't wait to get my hands on it. But I'm happy to know these are the kind of conversations that we want to have, and we want to have these with lots of people.
Sure.
So any contacts you may have that you felt were helpful to you, we'd love to hear about those as well, and we'd love to talk to them.
Okay. Okay. Will do. Appreciate it so much.
Of course. And Greg, are you by chance in October, are you going to be attending the Book of Mormon Evidence Conference?
We probably won't
Okay.
because I don't think the audience I'm looking for is there. We found that out in April. Most of those people there, and I hate to say it because I don't want to discourage anybody from going, but they were looking for sensationalism more or
Okay.
less. Um, they wanted things that, Joseph said this and nobody recorded it, but this guy had. And I found that when we were sitting there in our booth, people would come by and I say, "Do you like Captain Moroni?" And they immediately equated Captain Moroni with the prophet Moroni at the end of the Book of Mormon. And
Hmm.
I was astounded that so many people didn't know the difference between them.
Whoa. That is a bit weird.
So after
Anyway,
3 days of sitting there, I found out that people really don't understand who he is or where he fit in. They thought Moroni was Moroni.
that is a bit interesting. I haven't met
Yeah,
anybody like that quite yet, but it's weird that you had that experience. But
yeah.
anyway, thank you, Greg. This has been so much fun. We'll have to do this again sometime. Thank you again for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Sam. Nice to meet you. And hopefully we'll see you again.
Nice to meet you.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.